Shri T.N. Chaturvedi ji, the chairperson of the Institute of Public Administration, Chatterjee, the director, distinguished members of the faculty, and the trainees in this advanced professional program. IIPA is, you call it with an acronym. It's indeed a privilege for me to be invited to participate in the 40th convocation of this mid-service training program of the Institute. I'm indeed fortunate that I had the privilege of working with Mr. Chaturvedi for some time when we were both colleagues in Parliament. He had a great career as a civil servant. Thereafter, in his post-civil service assignments which was given to him, where he discharged a great national duty. And then in public affairs, as a member of Parliament, Rajya Sabha for 2 terms, an extremely conscientious senior statesman in the society. I wish him all the good health and many more years of public service. It's also a very pleasant coincidence for me because for me it's a reunion with an old school colleague. We were together in class, Dr. Chatterjee and me, and he, also having retired from the government, is discharging his public duties. I've had an opportunity at the Academy in Mussoorie, almost year after year, to speak at the mid-service training programs of the service. Frankly, every profession today needs a mid-service training. There are many professions where instead of having a mid-service training, periodically always lecture course where people can tune themselves to the technique. The medical profession is one such example. What you studied in your medical colleges and the practices that you started with over a long period of time evolve. And with every invention or discovery made in the world, new procedures which are invented, they spread and spread very rapidly. And all new doctors, surgeons, physicians, then go by what are the established procedures. The Institute of Chartered Accountants, in fact, organizes many serious in-service programs for practicing accountants, because globally the accounting practices change, the management practices change. Private sector executives learn from experience. But then there are institutions which update them with the new concepts. And it's quite obvious that nobody really should be left behind the times. In fact, for an important institute like judiciary, you now have at Bhopal the National Judicial Academy, where members of the senior judicial institutions periodically go and go through courses. Go through lectures, because as the economy changes, as the legal trends world over changes, they are entitled to follow those trends. The legal profession of which I am a part currently had no such program. And therefore I now find that the younger generation, who's either been trained in professional institutions, has tended in many ways to move ahead of its predecessors, because the structured trainings are not there. There is also a very odd institution of the politicians, for whom there is no institution. But that's one institution that they almost get trained by the day, because theirs is a 24/7 profession, and as they grow, they deal with administration, they deal with the people. They start off with populist ideas, which may be inspired by both populism or idealism, and then they do the balancing act of weighing it along with the needs of administration and governance. But then in reaching that balancing position, it takes time. And of course, there can be no such institution, but the Parliament, for instance, for members of Parliament, organizes such courses in a regular manner. When new MPs get elected, there is an extensive training program for them, and some of the older MPs or others from the parliamentary staff who are trained go there to lecture them, and there are organized courses which are held for them. Why do you need to do this? As the director, Dr. Chatterjee, mentioned, there are many impacts which the changing situation is having on us. The first impact is that socially we can see a large change in the society. In terms of economy, there is a huge change between what we thought 40 years ago, what we thought 10 years ago, and where we have come to a realization now. Technology has impacted us. Internationally, the world is getting more and more integrated. And therefore, with these changes in the society, what are the needs where a civil servant or an officer in any branch of governance needs to attune himself? Today he finds the demographic composition of the population has changed. Not merely that we have a much younger profile population, but the fact is that you have almost a 35% middle class in the society. And just below that 35% middle class, you have a very thick layer now emerging of an aspirational class. People who want to grow and want to become a part of that middle tier of the society. And there is a lot of hunger in them. And there is a lot of restlessness in them in aspiring to reach that grade. And this will also have an impact because more and more people will leave the rural areas, and a question will arise that are we not entitled to the quality of life which our fellow citizens elsewhere have? And therefore, over the next decade, 2 decades, you'll see a huge expansion of urban India, suburban India, which is going to take place. Now, of each category, the aspirations are going to be different. But the commonality is that the aspirations are going to be there. If it is the landless laborer, if it is a below poverty line section of society, his or her concerns have to be addressed first. If there is an agriculturist living at a subsistence level, his concerns have to be considered. If there is a slum dweller in a city, his concerns would be different. If there is a middle class section of society, urban India, his concerns would be different. And therefore, from basic needs to higher aspirations, you have the responsibility as a link between the governance structures and the citizenry to attune yourself with all these factors. The economy. No longer an economy of controls. Today, the world over, the changes take place. Are we tuning ourselves with the kind of needs of environment? Now, any one of you may eventually become a trade negotiator or a participant in an environmental dialogue, which is also a form of a trade negotiation. You may have to negotiate investments. You may have to handle disasters. You may have to handle agitations. You may have to handle departments which are dealing entirely with the social and health issues, educational issues. And therefore, your expertise has to be extremely well-rounded. And in this well-rounded expertise, you need to learn from the successful experiments of others. Now, there are collectors who've set up an extraordinary benchmark in their districts. And it's these role models that need to be emulated. And therefore, success stories of successful civil servants. What is it that a successful civil servant must have? He has to tune to the highest levels of integrity. He must be fearless in speaking out his mind. He can't only go with the trend. If he has an alternative viewpoint, it may well be a valid viewpoint. In a most disciplined manner, he has to express it. He must have credibility. He must have ability to pull on with his team. He must also have the capacity in a parliamentary democracy to understand what the government policy is, how it is to be pursued, and yet maintain a reasonable distance from the political thicket. Now, that's a dividing line where he has to choose himself. And finally, a civil servant need not, like his minister, be necessarily be populist, but he has to strike the right balance between governance and compassion, because you are at the end of the day dealing with people. And the object of your experience through the service years and all the mid-service years and the training is to strike this right balance. I'm sure this course which the IIPA has imbibed in you will be of great utility to most of you. And I wish you all the success and all the very best to the IIPA in its future activities. Thank you.